Alright, this is chapter 17. It's going to be polymers for prosthetic dentistry. These are just the objectives you can find in the beginning of that chapter. Alright, so for an overview, the resins that are used to make complete and partial dentures, and also orthodontic retainers and maxillofacial prostheses, those are going to be acrylic resins. Okay, so they play an important role in making those removable appliances for patients. This figure right here shows a removable acrylic orthodontic tooth movement device. Okay. So what polymers are they are large, long chain molecules, and they're formed by chemically joining two smaller molecules together. Those two smaller molecules, those are called monomers. Okay, so polymers are joined by two monomers. When two or more different types of those monomers join together, then the polymer that's formed from that, it's called a copolymer. And whenever the act of forming polymers together, that's called polymerization. So cross-linked polymers, that's whenever side chains of adjacent polymers bond together, and that's what cross-linked polymers are. There's going to be two types of polymerization. There's addition polymerization and condensation. So what addition is it's the most common, and there's three different stages. There's the initiation, then there's propagation and termination, and there are different ways of curing materials. So the ones that react by chemical means, that's chemical curing. The ones that react with heat or use heat to initiate the reaction, those are heat curing. And then the materials that are reacted by light or activated by light, those are photo or light cured. Now, condensation polymerization, your book mentions that there's not many uses in dentistry for condensation polymerization, so we don't go into that. Okay, with acrylic resins or plastics, the different uses for that are going to be denture bases, denture teeth, reline and repair prostheses, provisional acrylic partial dentures, tissue conditioners, and custom impression trays. Synthetic polymers used in dentistry, that's what acrylic resins are. They're synthetic polymers. And the reason why they're called acrylic resins is because they're derived from acrylic acid. So the acrylic resin forms when a liquid, it's a liquid monomer, is mixed with a powder, and that powder contains small polymer beads in it. So that mixture then undergoes polymerization and ends up being polymethyl methacrylate. Now, acrylic resins are very useful because they can be shaped to any contour, they can be custom colored to match the shade of teeth, not only teeth, but also gingiva or skin. And the acrylic resins that are used in dentistry, they're a lot of the time modified um, by the addition of plasticizers, rubbers, and fillers. And what those all do is it changes their physical properties. So a lot of the time when the polymers go through the polymerization process, they actually have shrinkage to them. Okay. Um, and then other sources of that dimensional change, other than just the polymerization, they could have dimensional change from water sorption and thermal expansion. And patients should be aware that the denture base will increase in overall size when it absorbs water. So it's kind of a good thing because that expansion from the water, it helps offset the shrinkage that occurs during the polymerization. Okay. The strength of these acrylic resins is fairly low. They're not very hard materials, so because they're not very hard materials, they're subject to change. Sorry, subject to wear. And a lot of the time they will break if they're dropped. And as far as the thermal conductivity goes, denture bases do not conduct temperature well, and therefore, if a patient has one in their mouth, it's easy to burn the mouth when they're wearing the dentures because there's not good thermal conductivity. Okay, so the types of processing has some effect on the properties. Keep in mind that polymerization is never 100% complete, and there also may be varying amounts of free monomer that's present in the polymerized material. So chemical cured versus heat cured. The chemical cured are going to end up being softer and weaker, less color stable. They may cause tissue burns and may undergo shrinkage. And with the heat in the pressure pot, there's less shrinkage, good wear resistant, but it still breaks. Porosity, there's porosity in the acrylic, and if there is a porosity in the acrylic, it'll weaken it and also make it prone to collect any debris or microorganisms. And because of the porous surface, then denture odor and stains, they're going to develop more readily as well. So another thing to keep in mind is sensitive patients can react to the components of the denture material. They can have an allergic reaction. Okay? Um, the, the primary function of acrylic resin its job is to retain the artificial teeth that are in the prostheses, and they also have the job of distributing forces of the mastication over over the mouth, which also is going to help reduce that pressure on their alveolar ridge, and which helps with slowing down the resorption process of their alveolar ridge, because if there was still a lot of pressure on the alveolar ridge, then that would contribute to resorption of that bone. Okay, so the acrylic resin helps to distribute those forces, reduce the pressure, and retain those artificial teeth. The acrylic resins we kind of talked about, they polymerize through addition reaction, and they're supplied as a powder or a liquid. A lot of the time, some pigments are added to them to give them colors that resemble the oral mucosa, and then sometimes titanium dioxide is added to the acrylic to help keep it from becoming too transparent. The very first stage when the polymer and monomer are mixed, that's called the sandy stage. And the reason why it's called the sandy stage is, well, simply because it looks grainy, okay? Similar to sand and water, and it's going to have a runny consistency. The second stage occurs when um, powder particles absorb the liquid through their surface and only their surface, and that's called the stringy stage. And that's going to be thicker than the sandy stage. And then the third stage, the dough stage, um, that's going to be the thickest, one of the thickest, or not the thickest, but one thicker than the stringy stage. And the um, the dough stage happens when more of the powder goes into the solution, and it changes from that stringy to that doughy. And the doughy stage is more easily manipulated. The fourth stage is the very final stage. It's called the rubber stage, and the reason why is just because it has the rubbery consistency. And at this point, it can no longer be manipulated to form the denture base. So it cannot be manipulated in that stage anymore. So some of the heat-cured resins can be placed in the microwave in a microwave for processing, and in this instance, processing time is greatly sped up, and another thing is injection molding, which injection molding um, is a way of processing by injecting the material into a mold when it is in the doughy form, so the second to last stage. And that helps with shrinkage and porosity. It helps to reduce that. We kind of already talked about chemical cured resins, heat cured, and light cured, so I'm going to skip over that for now. Okay, denture reline materials or liners. Um, there are, so complete and partial dentures sometimes have a very soft lining material that's placed on the tissue-bearing surface of the denture base. Um, these soft liners are often used as short-term treatment for a few days to a few weeks, and that allows tissues to heal after the patient has had surgery. But they can also be used for long-term treatment for patients who have chronic soreness from the hard denture bases. Okay. The long-term soft liners, those are made from silicone rubber or acrylic, and the long-term liners, those are processed at room temperature or sometimes also with application of heat. Okay, so these pictures right here, it's going to show the long-term soft liners. A lot of the time, the short-term soft liners, they're referred to as tissue conditioners or treatment liners. Okay, and the short-term liners can be placed at chairside. So very often, dentures become loose over time, and that just has to do with the alveolar bone underneath that denture base. The ridges start to resorb, especially with the harder materials, and The way to make those loose dentures fit well again is to place lining material to fill in those spaces. And the most common material used for that purpose is acrylic resin that's similar to the original denture-based material. With the chairside technique, a chemical cured acrylic resin that comes out as a polymer powder and liquid monomer that's commonly used. And how they do that is first an acrylic burr is used to remove a very, very thin layer of the tissue-bearing surface of the denture base, and the new material is placed on that and the denture is reseated, and that position of the denture is held until the material just begins to harden. The laboratory reline uses an indirect technique instead, and with how they do that is they take an impression of the tissues that are tissues made inside the existing denture, and a cast is made from that impression and they send it off to the lab. So always, always, always proper infection control procedures should be followed, especially when a denture is transported from the dental laboratory or to the dental laboratory, and then when it is received from the dental laboratory and given to the patient. Okay. Keep in mind that patients may not receive professional advice on how to use and take care of their over-the-counter liners, and a lot of the time they'll use the liners far beyond their useful life. So we need to be educating the patients on that as well. Okay. Denture teeth. So plastic or acrylic resin and composite material and porcelain teeth are used for the teeth in complete and partial dentures, and each has its advantages and disadvantages. The majority of denture teeth used for the removable prostheses, they're made from acrylic resin. The reason why is acrylic teeth are very tough and they chemically bond to the acrylic base of the denture. The composite resin, however, has a more natural appearance and translucency, so a lot of patients will like that. And the porcelain teeth are brittle, hard, and highly resistant to wear. So this figure right here shows maxillary dentures with porcelain teeth, so just on the maxillary with porcelain teeth, and these teeth have excessively worn down the opposing natural teeth. Okay, this is kind of a gross picture, I know, or kind of creepy, but I think it's really cool that plastics or acrylic resins, keep in mind when I say plastics, I'm also referring to acrylic resins at the same time. They're used for maxillofacial prostheses, and so these prostheses have specialized characteristics so that they can color match to surrounding skin, be tear resistant in thin layers, resistant to stain, very, very flexible, and attached to surrounding skin with adhesives. So this picture right here is of a flexible acrylic prosthesis for nose that was lost to cancer. So look how good that nose looks. And I don't know, I would never guess that that is a fake nose. Okay. Some of the materials that have been used for this are synthetic latexes, plasticized vinyl resins, and silicone rubbers. Okay, for denture repair. So acrylic complete and partial dentures, they can be repaired pretty easily when they're broken. The repair of a partial denture with a metal framework is a little more complex, but it's also depending on the location of the break. So always keep in mind that a broken prostheses should always be disinfected at chairside before it is transported to the laboratory. Super glue should not be used on a prosthesis if it's broken. And how you can repair it is by light cured dimethyl acrylate. They can repair broken acrylic prostheses and also fabricate custom trays and record record bases for dentures. So you would use light cured repair material if dentures break. Custom trays and record bases. So similar to other chemical cured acrylics, the tray materials are supplied as both a powder and a liquid that are mixed together. And when that mixture reaches dough stage, the material is adapted over the tissue portion of the cast by hand and to a uniform thickness, so an even thickness. Record bases are rigid bases that correspond roughly to the denture base. They are used in the construction stage of the denture and have wax rims added to them over the ridge areas. The technique for making the custom trays and record bases are for the light cured dimethyl acrylate is the same method as for the chemical cured materials, except instead of mixing powder and liquid, a sheet of preformed material is removed from its lightbox package and adapted over the cast or wax spacer. And you can see these procedures in your book on page 319 and 324, procedures 7-1 and 7-2. Instructions for new denture wearers. We need to let them know what to expect. Keep in mind that when patients are new to wearing dentures, it can be a very frustrating experience for them, especially if they don't know what to expect from their new dentures. Some dentures create a feeling of fullness to the mouth, and the reason why is because, well, it is kind of a fullness of the mouth, and the patient is not used to that yet. Okay, so some patients may have difficulty pronouncing some words, especially F and S sounds. And another thing is that the biting force of dentures is only about 20% of that with natural teeth. So the dentures sit on top of tissues that are compressible, and there will be more movement when eating because of that compression. Saliva. So saliva is important to help people swallow, right? It also helps lubricate the tissues in the mouth, and it also helps form a seal with the dentures. And so whenever a patient has new dentures put in their mouth, then the mouth is going to have a reaction towards this and produce a lot more saliva. So the patient will have excess saliva. The upper dentures are going to form a seal to the palate, and the lower dentures are going to be a lot looser. We need to tell the patient to, or we need to help the patient position their tongue to help keep the lower denture seated so that it doesn't move around on them too much. We need to inform our patients that the dentures can rub sore spots, and cheek biting is not unusual. The patient should never try to adjust these dentures on their own because they can ruin them pretty easily. But you will get patients that will try to fix their dentures on their own. They either don't want to come in or don't want to pay for it. So, even though a lot of the time a denture adjustment is free of charge. So, if teeth were recently extracted, the alveolar bone and tissues are going to shrink once they heal up, and we need to let our patients know that the denture will become loose after that as well. And then, as always, regular dental checkups, those are required to check for oral cancer and to make sure that the denture is still serving the patient well. So home care. Patients should clean the tissue surfaces of teeth, or tissue surfaces and the teeth and outer surfaces of the denture with a denture brush. We have those in our clinic. Whenever they bring their denture into the office, whenever they're getting a cleaning, we can take their appliance and remove the calculus off of the prostheses or the bacteria or plaque off of the prostheses by placing it in a denture cleaning solution inside of a zippered bag and then putting it into the ultrasonic. That'll shake off all of that and kind of break it down. Okay. Acrylic resin prostheses, they absorb water and are sensitive to water loss. So the patients need to be instructed to keep those prostheses wet during the periods of storage. That's why a lot of the time you would see dentures in a glass of water to help retain that wetness of it. Okay, that's going to help prevent dimensional change and distortion, because both of those things can affect the fit of the denture. And this picture just shows home care products for cleaning dentures. So in summary, acrylic resins are versatile materials. They can be used to replace missing oral structures. They have the ability to chemically bond to one another, and they have the ability to be repaired or relined. And when they're taken care of, they're pretty strong and durable. Okay. If you guys have any questions about this, always let me know. Thank you.